Chapter 6 Nexus. Zuko stares at the light he keeps flickering by his trunk. Most nights he sits up, using the trunk as a table as he tries to puzzle out his next steps. Most nights he has no other choice. Tonight he has little left to plan. There is food and water. The villagers are beginning to recover their strength, and the messenger ought to return from Shujing in another day or two. When that happens, there will be nothing left but to rebuild the houses. They'll have the supplies they need. Sickness and hunger will be a thing of the past, at least for most of them. The people will survive with or without Zuko, and he can't decide whether he's grateful for it or not. On the one hand, his usefulness was the only reason they tolerated him at the start. If they don't have to rely on him anymore, then what's keeping them from driving him away now? Especially now that Tomoe knows who he really is. But on the other hand, it's been days since his last full night of sleep, and after a full day of carrying fish and firewood and clambering around on roofs, it's hard to keep his eyes open. There is nothing left for him to plan tonight. For the first time since his arrival, he can rest without any fear that Shusoku will suffer for it. For the first time in ages, he can go to sleep knowing that he's done enough. But despite it all, his mind refuses to quiet. Someone has been visiting the village at night. It sounds insane. Even more so, thanks to the fact that the villagers have been speculating about whether some river spirit might have come to help them. But he can't deny the fact that it's happened. Someone had to bring the fish here. Someone apparently brought an extraordinary amount of water along with them as well. There is a possibility floating in the back of his mind, the faintest hint of an idea of who it might be. He knows one person who can move enormous amounts of water with very little effort, one who claimed to have healing abilities. It's ridiculous. He knows that. Probably even more ridiculous than the possibility of a river spirit taking an interest in Shusoku. At least a spirit might have a reason for being here. She wouldn't. She can't be here. He keeps repeating that. She isn't here. She would have no reason to take such a risk, and even less reason to help. For all Zuko knows, she might have been lying about her healing abilities. Or if not, she probably needed the water from that little blue vial she wore around her neck in Ba Sing Se. After what Azula did to the Avatar, there is no possible way she could have any of that left. Certainly not enough to make such a difference for an entire village. But there is someone out there. Someone has been helping the people every night, and if Zuko can't find a way to force the most ridiculous possibilities from his mind, he will drive himself mad over it. And, he supposes, he still needs a distraction from Azula's letter. Something to keep him from puzzling over what exactly she meant about taking care of the Avatar problem. About all the horrible fates that could befall the Avatar at Azula's hand, that may have already befallen him. After all, she must have sent the letter 2 days ago or more for it to have reached him out here. If she gave orders before sending the letter, worse, if she found the Avatar and did the work herself, then it may already be over. He can't afford to linger on that. Whatever Azula has done is her responsibility. Zuko never asked her to intervene. He never really wanted to kill the Avatar in the first place, and he never wanted the credit for it after Azula shot the boy with lightning. Though he is grateful for it now in a strange way. Before, Zuko had always thought that there was something he could do to prove himself, some victory grand enough to win Father's approval. As much as it still burns him from the inside out, at least he knows better now. Defeating the Avatar is the single greatest accomplishment in Father's eyes, and it still isn't enough. Maybe if he'd realized that sooner, things could have been different. maybe Uncle would be here with him instead of rotting away in prison. Maybe the gnawing sensation inside his chest wouldn't keep coming back. He closes his eyes. It's too late to change anything, and he knows it. Maybe this is for the best. He's stuck in Shusoku, but at least here, surrounded by his own people, he can make a difference. At least here, he's far enough away that neither father nor Azula can reach him. And if he can find out who else has been helping the people, maybe he can do better than driving Azula and her vague threats from his mind. Maybe he can find a way to express his gratitude for all the help the mysterious visitor has given them. Even if he can't figure out exactly who it is, Zuko can probably find a way to make their work easier. And more importantly, he can prove to himself that it isn't the one person he keeps imagining. There has to be some other explanation. When the rest of the village goes quiet and the light fades even further, Zuko extinguishes his flame with a breath. Digging through his trunk with one hand, he finds his swords and straps them across his back. He likely won't need them, but he can't imagine venturing out into the night without them. In truth, he has a hard time imagining himself going out into the night without his mask, but that is long gone, and he has nothing else to disguise himself with. But he still has his swords, and he can't think of any reason not to carry them. As close to silent as possible, he pushes out through the crooked, creaking door and into the gathering darkness. Though pale pinkish light still streams outward from the western horizon, the rest of the sky is rapidly fading to indigo, and the first of the stars shine through as pinpricks in the dimness. Beneath it all, Shusoku almost looks pretty, still lopsided and crumbling in places, draped with colorful blankets where there should be planks and roofing tiles, but peaceful. And for the first time, stable as well. After checking the streets once more to be certain that he's alone, Zuko rounds to the back of the house, leaps high enough to grab the edge of the roof, and slowly, carefully, hauls himself up. After yet another day of work, his muscles ache, but he makes it onto the roof and lies flat along the edge. From here, he will have a better view of the village if the mysterious helper appears again. And from here, he won't be seen. Nobody ever looks up. As time goes on and late evening wears away into night, Zuko remains still on his stomach, his chin resting atop folded arms. Once he manages to wedge himself into place so that he isn't continually sliding closer to the edge, it's surprisingly comfortable. If nothing else, the roofing tiles smell better than the mat he's been sleeping on, and the evening breeze is just cool enough to be pleasant. His eyelids begin to droop as the weight of his near sleepless nights begin to settle over him. He probably should have chosen a different night for this. A night when he isn't aching from hours of work and practically falling asleep on a roof. A night when he can stay awake long enough to see the figure appear. But tired or not, he needs answers, and something tells him that tonight is the best chance he will ever get. So he stays, fighting to keep his eyes from closing, and trying to focus on the darkened village sprawling out before him. A few slight shifts in the shadows startle him into alertness until he can make out the shapes of opossum foxes creeping between the houses, and his eyes grow heavy again. But then, as the moon glides higher in the sky and the pale light finds its way to the village, he sees something different. A mist gathers just beyond the edge of town, and when he squints and blinks to clear the fog from his vision, it coalesces into a more distinct shape. A cloud, almost. It moves closer, sliding toward the central street, vanishes behind a house, and then emerges again on the other side. Zuko's breath catches, and he stares. He's not imagining this. Or he doesn't think he's imagining it. He clenches his fists until his nails bite into his palms as confirmation. At the very least, he isn't dreaming. As the patch of mist moves closer, the dark figure in the center becomes clearer. Though the edges are indistinct, cloaked in billowing shadows, the figure itself seems small. A person wearing robes, he suspects. a person a bit smaller than Zuko, wrapped up in 2 large robes, and somehow surrounded by their own personal bank of fog. He can understand why the villagers would have taken the figure for a spirit. Everything about it looks unearthly, gliding up the street like the ground is perfectly smooth while the swirling mists catch the faint moonlight. It looks unnatural, but Zuko has seen spirits before. For all that the gliding seems impossible, for all that the delicate fog gives the figure a ghostly appearance, it doesn't seem like a spirit to him. His eyes widen as the figure comes closer, following the street directly toward him, before pausing just in front of the door to his shack. From this angle, he can't see the face concealed by the hat and veil, but he can tell that the figure is, in fact, a girl, or perhaps a woman, dressed in oversized robes. Human, but in disguise. He cranes his neck to the side for a better view, doing his best not to breathe. Any noise, any disturbance at all, and he is certain that he'll frighten her away. But before he can twist himself far enough to catch a glimpse of her silhouette under the veil, she squares her shoulders and steps forward, out of sight. He hears the door creak open and holds his breath as he waits for another sound. But he can hear nothing over the sound of his own pulse, and after a few moments, the door creaks again and the figure reemerges. Zuko considers leaping down from the roof to confront her. He's in the perfect position to do it, and the stranger won't have time to react until after he's seen her face. He doesn't move. Whoever she is, it doesn't seem right to startle her. Instead, he lies still until she is halfway down the street again before he slides toward the edge of the roof. Dropping soundlessly to the ground, he darts into the shadows and watches until she rounds a corner up ahead. Keeping tight against the houses as much as he can, Zuko follows her. The prickling sensation at the back of her neck doesn't subside. If anything, it grows stronger. As hard as she tries to remind herself that there's nothing lurking in the shadows, she can't quite believe it. The feeling is too close, too real, and it sends shivers coursing up and down her spine. Tonight, unlike most, the feeling doesn't dissipate when she steps out of the trees and glides down the open path toward the village. Tonight, it feels like the presence that has been stalking her through the trees since midday has broken loose from the forest. Like there is nowhere she can escape it until daylight returns. After tonight, it might be best to stay away for a night or two. The village is doing better, and if she returns every night, they'll find her out sooner or later. For their sake, it might be best if she leaves the boy from the capital to look after them for a few days. She won't abandon them. Not permanently. She probably just needs a few days away to throw off the sensation of being watched. And if there is someone following her, she would do best to break her pattern, to draw her pursuer off of her own trail and away from the village. Not that that's likely. She's probably more tired than she realizes, and a few nights sleeping in her own tent while Appa and Momo keep watch will make the difference. By the time she returns, she will be better rested, and the uneasy prickling will go away on its own. It has to. But tonight, she's gone too far to turn back. She reaches the village cloaked in her usual shield of mist and turns directly toward the northwestern edge of the houses. Now that she's come this far, she can't turn back without finding what she's looking for. The little house with the crooked door and the near-perpetual light inside. The person who lives there. The person who can only be the boy from the capital. The one who has been unknowingly working alongside her for days now. Something tells her that finding him will make all the fear worthwhile. With the mists twisting around her thicker than usual, she strides up the street, moving as quickly as she can without breaking the illusion of her even, gliding steps. Tonight, she doesn't bother keeping to the shadows. She has only one goal, and even from here, she can see the house she's looking for. And tonight, for the first time, the light is gone. Straightening her shoulders, Katara exhales. This is her chance. The sensation of eyes on her back doesn't fade, but she does her best to ignore it. After a deep, steadying breath, she steps beneath the eaves of the house and does her best to peer through the gaps around the door before slowly pushing it open. Despite her caution, the door creaks as though in complaint. But the street behind her stays silent, and when the door opens wide enough for her to step inside, the house is empty. It's a tiny space, just a single room with an uneven earthen floor. Nowhere for anyone to hide. Holding the door open to admit what little light the moon and stars afford, Katara surveys the space. A thin, worn sleeping mat lies against the opposite wall, and next to her, a trunk is pushed into the corner. Nothing remarkable, and more importantly, nothing she can immediately identify. She thinks she can see a row of candle stubs lined up beside the trunk, and a dark, rumpled section of cloth lies diagonal across the sleeping mat, but by the moon's watery rays, she can't decide whether it's a blanket or a robe or something else entirely. She edges a little closer and runs her fingertips over the lid of the trunk. It's too dark to make out the details, but she can feel the elaborate engravings, and for a second, she is tempted to rifle through all its contents. Surely there must be something hidden amidst the boy's belongings to reveal who he is. If she would just look. No. She pulls herself back. This feels like too great a violation, and it's too dark for that anyway. Whoever the boy is, this isn't the way to find him. She frowns, scanning the room one more time before she backs toward the door. He must be out there somewhere in the village, helping one of the villagers. Just because she's never seen him out at night doesn't mean that it's impossible. Just because she can't think of anyone who would need his help right now doesn't mean that things haven't changed. The door creaks again as she lets herself out, and the creeping sensation reasserts itself once she is in the open, even stronger than before. Either her unknown observer is closer, or there is more than one of them. She doesn't care for either possibility, and her pace quickens. She'll search the village as well as she can for the boy who has been living in the little crooked house, but after that, everything else will have to wait. She can't stand the feeling of being watched for much longer.